lunch. You know, it's funny, a couple weeks back when I heard they had the afternoon session, I thought to myself, well, that's probably okay. And as long as it's not after lunch, or I'm not between you and the happy hour. Here you know, I got it both ways. And by the way, I'm very aware there's an important baseball game for Canadians tonight. So we're going to keep pushing through this and make sure you guys get out to do what's important. Again, admirals, generals, distinguished guests, it's a real honor to be here. I want to thank the entire committee for what's really been a really great morning. Trying to put some context perspective, I think, around this panel, just kind of listening to what's going on in the morning. A lot of great background data, economic data about the Asia-Pacific region. I think really kind of sets the stage and context for what's important around maritime security. I think the last panel, a strategy. What is a strategy? How well have nation states done in implementing those strategies? This panel, I think, gets down to the resource. It's the how. It's how do you pay for it? Given all of the other things that nation state is responsible for, how do you pay for the security? And I think that's really what I hope this panel has a chance to dive a little bit into, provide some context for the audience. A daily read of any news media anywhere in the world demonstrates the continued interest of nations to improve the protection of borders, be in the air, on land, or especially at sea. Balancing those security interests against a nation's needs to manage economic growth, providing for growing populations, and establishing a functional governing structure makes it very relevant in a forum like this to ask, where does the next dollar go? And how do you decide? Where does it go and how do you decide? Nowhere in the globe is this more relevant than the Asia-Pacific region. This area accounts for nearly 2/5 of the global economic growth. Developing nations of the Asia-Pacific region, as you saw this morning, we're going to hang around a 6.5% economic growth. That's not too bad. Again, as China's economy moderates a little bit, but for the foreseeable future, that's pretty impressive for this region. GNI per capita life expectancy continued to trend upward in this region. Extreme poverty has declined faster in this region than anywhere else on the planet. However, a number of the populations still do live in poverty. Malnutrition and healthcare challenges are real, as well as greenhouse gas emissions. So the challenge is protection versus prosperity. Protection versus prosperity. How do you balance that? How do nations provide that? So we have a great panel assembled here today to discuss these challenges and strategies through the lens of 3 different nations. Chairman Captain Zhang from the People's Liberation Army Naval Institute will present on the challenges that the LA Navy faces in its efforts to modernize. Dr. Pant from King's College of London will present on India's efforts to modernize and expand its maritime forces. Finally, Dr. Thayer from the University of New South Wales will discuss efforts of smaller countries in Southeast Asia to modernize with a focus on the Vietnam People's Navy. The global maritime and border security market is expected to increase from approximately $15.6 billion US in 2015 to over $23 billion in 2025. That's a CAGR of 4.23%. Pretty impressive. Demand is driven by internal security threats such as terrorism, threats to sovereignty, illegal border infiltrations, piracy, drug trafficking, and critical infrastructure security, among many others. The investments in other regions around the world are really driven by economic realities. Here in North America, my good friends from Canada aside, the U.S. is really going to be put aside by another round of sequestration. So probably not a lot of growth coming out of the U.S. Latin America, I think of Brazil, coming out of the hangover of the Olympics, the World Cup prior to that, will really be focusing on replacement of aging equipment. It's going to be a big need down there in Latin America and South America. Europe, a lot of financial constraints being caused by Brexit, the immigration activities underway. Really not a huge investment probably coming out of Europe as well. Africa, security threats are real, more land, territorial borders, but certainly will be money spent there as well. The Middle East, I think we're all aware of the falling price of oil, but that's such investment coming out of the Middle East. But you know, there's no doubt the Middle East is sitting on a pretty substantial sovereign oil fund. And if the threat comes up, the Middle East will spend. But at the end of the day, the Asian Pacific region countries are among the fastest growing economies in the world, and their large defense and homeland security modernization plans fuel the modernization efforts and keep Asia Pacific as the largest market in this space, border and maritime security. Investments are expected to grow at a CAGR of over 4.5% in the foreseeable future. So let's get on with our future presentations. China shares its border with 14 countries, and it's anticipated China will account for the largest spending in this segment due to the fact the country is a Class A member of the IMO and has always taken a strong stance against terrorism. China has more than 130 ports open for foreign trade, with more than 10,000 port facilities and 2,000 national flag ships serving international routes. Astounding, astounding numbers. Chair Captain Zhang, to you please, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to be invited here to attend this excellent conference. First, I want to express my sincere thanks to the host, organizers, and supporters of this conference, especially Rear Admiral Art McDonald, Dr. James O'Keefe, Colonel Frank Ebner, the defense attaché in Beijing. He assisted me in getting the visa at the last moment. And Ms. Ashley Newberg, Mr. Blake Withel, Lieutenant Colonel Commander Daniel Bradshaw, U.S. Navy, and Mr. Brian Cruz, along list. Thank you all. I think this conference is excellent, because this morning I raised some questions to my Japanese friends. No time. We had very good conversation after the session before lunch. So I think this conference provides a very good platform for us to exchange our views. Our views, points may be different, but this can promote mutual understanding, and we can control the differences and move forward our relationship, just as the China-U.S. relationship, and we have our very good relationship between the navies of the United States and China. I hope the navies, Japan and China, will also have a good relationship in the future. My presentation today only represents my own personal views. We'll cover briefly three parts. First is the direction of the future modernization of the PR Navy, my idea. And then the main drives of the modernization of the PR Navy. And lastly, maybe touch upon a little about the personnel and training challenges we are facing. First, about the direction of our PR Navy in the future. As you know, China pursues a three-step development of a strategy in modernizing its national defense and armed forces, in accordance with the national overall plan to realize modernization. The first step is to lay a solid foundation by 2010. The second step is to make major progress around 2020. And the third step is to basically reach the strategic goal of building informationized armed forces and being capable of winning informationized wars by the mid-21st century. In the historical course of China's reform and opening up over the last 3 decades or more, the Chinese PR Navy has invariably taken modernization as its central task. PR Navy has commissioned some new Soviet combatants, such as destroyers from Russia, and also indigenous build, and also frigates. We call the third generation of guided missile destroyers, 052C, 052D, and also the third generation of guided missile frigates manufactured by China, the 0548. These new destroyers and frigates are equipped with medium to long-range area air defense missiles, and also some new submarines have been commissioned in the Chinese PR Navy in recent years. According to the three-step development strategy in modernizing its national defense and armed forces, the Chinese PR Navy will continue to implement the military strategy of active defense in the future. It is working to build itself into a modern maritime force of operation consisting of combined arms with both nuclear and conventional means of operations. Taking informationization as the goal and strategic focus in its modernization drive, the Chinese Navy gives high priority to the development of maritime information systems and new generation weaponry and equipment. In line with the strategic requirement of offshore waters defense and open seas protection, the PRO Navy will gradually shift its focus from offshore water defense to the combination of offshore waters defense with open seas protection, and build a combined, multifunctional, and efficient marine combat force structure. The PRA Navy will enhance its capabilities for strategic deterrence and counterattack, maritime maneuvers, joint operations at sea, comprehensive defense, and comprehensive support. Now, the second question, the main drives for our modernization. I think there are 3 points. First is we want to follow the trend of today's worldwide revolution in military affairs, the IMA. You know that since the beginning of the 21st century, driven by rapid development of high technology, such as information technology, world military reform has come into a new phase with qualitative changes. As informationization has already become the main feature of the worldwide revolution in military affairs, joint operations have been the core conception of force structure. The world revolution in military affairs is proceeding to a new stage. Long-range, precise, smart, stealthy, and unmanned weapons and equipment are becoming increasingly sophisticated. Outer space and cyberspace have become new commanding heights in strategic competition among all parties. The form of war is accelerating its evolution to informationization. World major powers are actively adjusting their national security strategies and defense policies and speeding up their military transformation and force restructuring. The aforementioned revolutionary changes in military technologies and the form of war have not only had a significant impact on the international political and military landscape, but also posed new and severe challenges to China's military security. While navies of most countries around the world have made great efforts in developing informationized weaponry, they have also taken much more effort in reforming and reshaping its military formation, innovating its military theories, and improving its organizational system so as to promote overall military transformation. To the Chinese PL Navy, the in-depth development of worldwide revolution in military affairs is not only posing challenges, but also providing opportunities as well. The second point is that we want to adapt to the objective demand of the in-depth development of China's reform and opening up. Through 30 years reform and opening up, China has basically established the socialist market economy with great changes taking place in social structure, social organizational form, distribution methods of social resources. The military cannot develop without the social environment in which it exists. So the present Chinese military policy system and management style in many aspects can be dated back to the warring period, old, outdated, and have been formed under the condition of planned economy. Though adjustments have been made with the ongoing process of the nation's reform and opening up, the military policy system and management style adapted to socialist market economy on the whole have not been established. For instance, military human resources distribution, social welfare, and social security of the servicemen, modern professional military officers' system, socialized logistics support, and so on. We will make reform on these areas. The in-depth development of the nation's reform and opening up has not only put forward objective demand of the peer Navy, but also provided a favorable environment for the development of our Navy. The third point is that we want to meet the realistic requirements of fulfilling the missions we shoulder in the future. The new international security environment requires peer Navy to improve its capabilities of countering various security threats and accomplishing diversified military tasks, and ensure that it can not only deter and win wars, but also effectively respond to crises and maintain peace. Here I want to say that just at a large presentation, professor from England described the progress of Japan and South Korea. Also, the Chinese Navy has showed more and more international responsibilities and duties. For instance, ever since the end of 2008, the Chinese peer Navy has dispatched 24 flotillas of warships. Each flotilla is composed of 3 warships, 1 destroyer or 1 frigate, and 1 replenishment ship in the Gulf of Aden and waters of Somalia. And these flotillas have provided counter-piracy and escort operations there. And they have provided escort for more than 6,000 merchant ships, half of which are foreign merchant ships, including the World Food Organization vessels sailing to Somalia. So I think this is an example that with the development of the Chinese peer Navy, we can shoulder more and more international obligations and duties. At present, the Chinese peer Navy lags far behind the developing countries' navies in terms of weaponry, equipment, and technology. Peer Navy's weaponry and equipment is not at a high level in many aspects. So our Navy has a long way to go if it intends to better fulfill its missions of maintaining national sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity, and protect the interests of national development. Our last point is about the personnel and training challenges. As modernization goes on, especially with the commissioning of new ships in our Navy, including service ships, submarines, and new aircraft, the Chinese peer Navy finds itself short of professional officers and sailors as non-commissioned officers qualified for new weaponry and new types of war. I think there are 2 reasons for this. Each is the commissioning of new warships with high technology, and the other reason is that the attractiveness of the military service in the eyes of the young and well-educated people compared with more lucrative careers attainable elsewhere. So I think this is universal for most of the navies. For instance, my son doesn't like to join the Navy. I like the discipline he doesn't like. So he's working in the commercial sector as an IT engineer. So in recent years, considering the shortage of the qualified officers and non-commissioned officers and sailors, the Chinese peer Navy has enhanced our professional career education and military training. These main efforts include, first, to cultivate new type military personnel. China's armed forces, including the Navy, will continue with the strategic project for personnel training and perfect the system for military human resources. We will deepen the reform of military educational institutions and improve the tried training systems for new type military personnel. That's the tried training system is institutional education, that means military schools, and unit training when they are distributed into the forces, and military professional education, so as to pool more talented people and cultivate more personnel who can meet the demands of mechanized warfare. Second, I think is we will enhance realistic military training. The Imperial Navy will continue to attach strategic importance to combat training in realistic conditions, in real-world scenarios, and strictly temper the troops according to the outline of military training and evaluation. Now we also have an evaluation system for training. The Chinese Imperial Navy will constantly innovate operational and training methods, improve military training criteria and regulations, and work to build large-scale comprehensive training bases in an effort to provide real combat environments for training. The Imperial Navy will continue to conduct live setting training, IIT-based simulated training, and face-on-face confrontation training in line with real combat criteria, and strengthen command post training and joint and combined training. It will intensify training in complex electromagnetic environments, in complex unfamiliar terrains, and in complex weather conditions. Especially, I think the Chinese Imperial Navy has intensified its far sea training in the Western Pacific Ocean, as the Imperial Navy has constantly been conducting anti-piracy and escort operations in the Gulf of Aden and waters of Somalia. So the Imperial Navy has to train officers and sailors for far sea operations as conducted in these areas. As time is limited, I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senior Captain, for sharing certainly your strategic objectives, modernization roadmap, clarity, prioritization, investments around force structure, deployments, people and training. Really, really excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. Next up, and just for your bookkeeping, we're going to do all three presentations. Then we're going to do the coffee break, and then we're going to come back and wrap up with questions. So just so you know, we're going to get through the next two. India's plan to overhaul transportation infrastructure, including the construction of 14 strategic railway lines and roads near the country's borders, Pakistan and China, is expected to be a major boon for the border maritime security sector. Moreover, the country is expected to spend approximately $2 billion US towards an advanced structure. The Border Space Command that will use satellites to manage the international border with all their neighbors. India is currently undertaking several maritime security programs, including a national intelligence grid, NatGrid, to provide a single platform for all maritime agencies, and the Coastal Security Network project to install a chain of radar and electro-optic sensors at 84 remote sites. India is certainly modernizing for maritime security. Dr. Pant, the podium is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the organizers for having me here today. It's indeed a great pleasure to be talking to a very knowledgeable audience on a matter which perhaps pertains to the way we're looking at the region, the Indo-Pacific, and how we can manage maritime affairs in a larger strategic landscape. I will be talking about the rise of the Indian Navy in the context of its maritime ambitions, and also some of the enduring challenges that it had faced in the past, and it is likely to continue to face in the future. And I think it is important to understand both if we are to get a true picture of what the maritime domain from India's perspective is being reimagined in the context of changing political dynamic in the country and in the region. The Indian Navy is at an inflection point. It is at a very interesting point in its evolving trajectory for a number of reasons. One, which is should be amply clear, is the rising rates of growth that have given Indian Navy for the first time enough resources that it can actually operationalize this idea of projecting power. So I think this in and of itself has given a level of confidence to Indian Navy, which was not there before. The other is this idea of where India is situated in the larger global landscape. So India today is enmeshed in the global economic forces unlike any time in its previous post-independent history. And then again, India gives a certain centrality to India's maritime ambitions and puts Indian Navy at the center of those strategic debates. Third is a new reimagining of India's global role, which is happening concurrently with these two changes, with the rising rates of growth, with the greater enmeshment into the global economic order. That has given India new confidence to approach the world on its own terms without being defensive about its own power projection abilities, which I think allows India to transform or to overcome the sort of old non-alignment rhetoric and therefore garner and get a place amongst the like-minded nations in the region and beyond. But one aspect which generally people tend to forget, and which I think is a very recent development, is the coming to power of the first genuine center-right government in the country. In 2014, this gentleman, Mr. Modi, is leading a government in Delhi, which is the first genuinely center-right government. And when I say the center-right, a conservative government, I mean that the idea of national security is very clear from a certain perspective. It may have problems, it may have some challenges, but this idea that India needs to be more than just a non-aligned power, that India needs to be a leading global actor, that is a major change in India's global narrative. So India no longer is talking about a bridge between East and the West. India categorically today, and Mr. Modi is talking about an India that is at the front and center of global politics. And that means that from the political strategic level, a direction is being set for India's national security policies that for many of the critics of Indian national security establishment was absent before. So there are multiple ways in which India is changing and the way it is relating to the world is changing that will have important implications for the way India shapes its defense posture and in particular the way Indian Navy shapes its own future. So here, earlier this year, the Prime Minister of India gave a speech on at the International Fleet Review, where he articulated three themes. Basically, he said that for India and for Indian Navy, Indian Ocean region is a priority. We cannot be a state which is projecting power across the globe without first being a country that is able to maintain some semblance of control over the Indian Ocean region. So the idea that Indian Ocean region is a priority for the government is very categorical. It is not that this government has come out of this idea on its own. This has been a continuation of previous governments' attempts to articulate a similar strand, but the assertion is much more categorical under this government that Indian Ocean region is a priority and Indian Ocean region is being viewed differently. On the one side, the idea is that the idea of Indo-Pacific has emerged. So with Indo-Pacific, Indian Ocean becomes a center of great power contestation. But for the government in Delhi, Indian Ocean region becomes a strategic bridge between the Atlantic and the Pacific. That's how they are reimagining their geography. And therefore, this idea that India needs to have a modern and multi-dimensional navy which has full spectrum capability. So that is without doubt the ambition that the political masters in New Delhi are setting out for the Indian Navy. And again, this is something new which is happening. Indian Navy and other services have often complained that they have been operating in a vacuum. The government, Modi government is trying to rectify that by laying out certain strands of policy for the direction of the services, and Indian Navy emerges as the priority. So if you are looking at this idea of Indian Ocean region being a priority, why is that the case? Very simply, if you look at some of these numbers, it should be very apparent why that is the case for India. It has been very apparent for quite a long time. This is again not something that this government or the present government is articulating. This is a continuation of a trend that has viewed India as a major player in the Indian Ocean region, if not the preeminent player. However, what has changed? What has changed is again this idea that India today is enmeshed in the global economic order, unlike any time in the past. Which means that this idea of choke points attains a centrality that was not there during the Cold War days, when India was looking at the region much more apprehensively. Today, this is at the center. If India is to retain its economic rates of growth, if India is to retain its energy security, then security of the sea lanes of communication is important. It's imperative, and India will have to do its bit to protect those sea lanes of communication. Then this idea that somehow, again, with the rise of China, with America's strategic rebalance to the Asia, to the Indo-Pacific, Indian Ocean has emerged as a cockpit of great power rivalries. And if you're looking at the Indian Ocean region, India will have to re-envisage its role given these competing or new realities that are emerging. So therefore, Indian Ocean region had always been important, but certain trends that have emerged in recent years have accentuated those trends. So again, this idea of choke points and why this is important, we have discussed it in different contexts, but for India, given how closely enmeshed it is in the global economic order, attains a new dimension. Largely, Indian Ocean region had been a benign environment. Largely, it had been an area where India had felt very comfortable, despite the apprehensions during the Cold War, when it did not want, when it argued against the presence of what it called extra-regional navies then. Today, it is much more comfortable with the presence of extra-regional players in the region, and is operating much more confidently with them. However, the idea that the strategic geography is changing, that this idea of Indo-Pacific has somehow put Indian Ocean at the very center of global power dynamic, especially as they establish and emerging powers contest each other's primacy. That makes India center to this debate, or at least in the Indian eyes, central to the debate on the emerging trends in the region and beyond. The other aspect is, if you're looking at the region as India's neighborhood, then you're looking at the diversities, then you're looking at the challenges, both at a number of levels. Internal challenges, we were mentioning governance earlier in the day. A lot of what is happening in the region is a consequence of poor governance. So if you're looking at internal and external dysfunctionalities, from state problems to non-state actors, we are looking at a region of tremendous diversities. We are looking at this issue of state failure, which is fundamentally an issue of we are also looking at the territorial maritime disputes that have not been resolved, that continue to soar, and therefore that they continue to infect interstate relations in the region. So at the end of it all, what many would argue, and has been argued in the literature, is that poor governance contaminates the region much more significantly than either the interstate rivalries or the rise of non-state actors. And perhaps they are the consequence of poor governance. So if you are looking at the Indian Ocean region, or Indian Ocean in particular, this is very interesting because there is an entire mythology about Indian Ocean in India. Now, geographically, it's very clear that India is the center of. There are certain geographical advantages that India enjoys in the Indian Ocean region. But there is Indian Ocean, for example, is much more than mere an ocean for many Indian strategic thinkers. It is rather part of the way India had looked at its own role in the world. And therefore, for a long time, the argument was that despite being this preeminent player or power in the Indian Ocean region, or in the Indian Ocean, India somehow lost several decades in trying to articulate a maritime or a naval strategy. And the reason it is not difficult to decipher. Ever since independence, India has had a very continentalist mindset. Many have argued in the context of different countries. But the real problems, the real national security challenges that India continues to face are again remain in the northern frontier. So therefore, this idea that somehow India needs to have a maritime power projection ability was very far removed from Delhi, which was the center of decision making, and where most of the problems seem to be emanating from the northern frontier. And this has made this argument about Indian Ocean being central to India's own identity very problematic for several decades. Now, and if you look at the evolution, for example, of how where Indian Navy emerged in 1950 as an independent unit, but it had a great deal of difficulty in convincing the policymakers of its own relevance. So it was called the Cinderella service for a long time. It was not getting enough resources, it was being marginalized, and that caused a lot of heartburn because if you look at the sheer geography, there is no way to deny the role of that maritime part should have played in the Indian national security policy. Yet, the resource constraint, the pressure of the northern frontier, and the challenges emanating from the northern frontier were such that somehow Indian Navy was not at the front and center of Indian policy making, and policymakers continued to focus on had a very continentalist mindset and continued to focus on the challenges that were emanating from the north, perhaps rightfully so, given the context. However, if you look at how it has evolved, where Indian Navy has gone since then, again, a number of factors come into play. One, as I was discussing a few minutes back, or articulating a few minutes back, this idea of India's economic growth. So since the 1990s, when India shunned its socialist economic approach and joined the global economic mainstream, with the result that Indian economic rates of growth started rising, Indian Navy's ability to ask for funds, or Indian Navy's ability to articulate the need for India to have a maritime strategy became much more sophisticated and therefore much more convincing to the Indian policymakers. That Indian Navy, it was no longer the Cinderella service, but Indian Navy was at the center of the project that India was embarking on, namely India's relationship with the rest of the world, and based on the globalized economic networks that were emerging. And therefore, four major roles were pretty straightforward, relating to what India was trying to achieve and what Indian Navy was trying to achieve for Indian national security policy. Now, what has since then what has happened is that there has been constant evolution of Indian Navy's ability to argue for greater resources and for its centrality in the Indian maritime context. And one of the ways in which it has been able to do that is to call to make an argument about forward defense that involves India's ability to project power and India's ability to protect interests in far-flung regions beyond just its immediate shores. And this, if you look at the Indian maritime strategy, this has been broadly consistent with this idea that India has global interests in the post-1990s environment, and also that the rise of China has altered the strategic environment in and around the Indian Ocean, and therefore Indian Navy's centrality to Indian national security policy should only grow. That was the argument that Indian Navy has made in its maritime strategy, and has argued that this is something that India cannot ignore given the sort of constraints it would pose, not simply on India's strategic interests defined narrowly, but more broadly in terms of India's economic well-being and prosperity that now depend on India's ability to freely navigate across the globe, not simply around the Indian Ocean. So this is an argument that is very attractive to Indian policymakers. This is an argument, if you link the strategic rationale clearly to the economic rationale, it makes public more aware of why Indian maritime or naval strategy should be what it is, and therefore it allows Indian Navy to project itself or to maintain a centrality in the national security discourse, which was absent before. And what that also means is that Indian Navy gradually became the most important tool of as part of Indian diplomacy. So Indian Navy was not simply one of the three services protecting India or enhancing India's strategic interests, but very, very broadly defined. Indian Navy became a tool of enhancing India's global profile, which meant that India was not only engaged in basic confidence building measures, but also engaged at a number of levels with a number of other stakeholders. So if you see the evolution of India's thinking, just in terms of Indian Ocean region, it is very remarkable. On the one hand, in the Cold War days, India was telling the world, at least trying to articulate that it does not want any extra-regional interference in Indian Ocean region. Indian Ocean as a zone of peace was an argument that India came up with, mainly asking other navies to leave the region alone. If you look at what Indian Navy is now doing in the Indian Ocean with other navies, it is a remarkable shift given the sort of port visits, given the sort of military exercises that it is conducting, even with countries with whom it might not share converging interests, like China, for example. India and China also have had a number of naval exercises, not in the Indian Ocean, but around the Indian Ocean. So therefore, Indian Navy therefore becomes a way of not only building confidence with countries with which it is required, but also it's a way of signaling India's ability to project power in areas where perhaps India would like to gain leverage. For example, in Vietnam, in countries around China's periphery, where an argument has been made that much like China is engaged in South Asia, India should also be engaged in China's periphery, and therefore there have been a number of and therefore for that Indian Navy has become the central instrument by which India has been trying to deliver that message. Whether or not that message is received is another question. However, that argument itself shows how central Indian Navy is becoming to this strategic reimagining India's global role in terms of what India should or should not be doing in the realm of foreign policy. And this then is linked to two basic issues. One is that the protection of stocks, the securing of the seas, that sea lanes of communication should be protected. These are public goods, and India has a responsibility towards them. So this argument the argument where India was on the peripheries of global politics to a situation where now India is at the center of global politics, making a case that India is not only capable but also willing of doing things of protecting public goods like sea lanes of communication, which are essential for the economic prosperity of not only India but also the larger globe. And this is where Indian Navy has been very successful in articulating in its various strategy documents the need for Indian Navy to engage with the rest of the world, and the need for Indian Navy to make a positive case for itself, not simply a case whereby it is trying to protect Indian interests, but also a case whereby Indian Navy is being seen as a force for good. And this has been one of the biggest successes of Indian Navy's in Indian Navy in recent times compared to the other two services, which have sort of made a different case under different circumstances. And of course, there is a case of what, for example, the sort of maritime challenges that India continues to face, and the sort of impact that it has had on India's national security policy over the recent decades. And Mumbai is just one example, but there you can see that the larger link with India's national security matrix comes into play. So broadly, the structure remains a very ambitious one. This idea that India needs to develop full spectrum capabilities is very important, is very attractive. This idea that India has primary and secondary areas of interest is again very, very interesting. If you look at the debates in India about India's move into South China Sea debate, India's very active articulation of the need for freedom of the seas, India's very potent engagements with countries in East Asia and Southeast Asia. This is an argument where India, because of this idea of Indo-Pacific, looks at itself not merely as an Indian Ocean power, but also as a larger Pacific power, and all that it entails in terms of outreach and proactive policies. Now, expeditionary capabilities are something that Indian Navy has been, that is constantly being articulated that India needs expeditionary capabilities. force build-up in terms of what are the imperatives of the future. Some very interesting developments in terms of indigenization. The government, which I was talking about in the very beginning, the Modi government is talking about indigenization, self-reliance as a priority. Make in India is the new mantra, and along with that comes self-reliance even in defense procurement. This is some have argued that this is a goal that perhaps they will never achieve, but that's where India wants to go. That's what the ambition is, especially the new government has set out a very ambitious plan for achieving self-reliance without giving up on acquisitions in the short and medium term. So there are certain thrust areas which we have also talked about in the context of other states. In the case of India also they are applicable, and that's where a lot of pressure, a lot of thrust is being put. So by and large, if we are looking at this idea of Indian Ocean as India's ocean, that idea has been given up almost. Given up in terms of the way it is being articulated. In the old world days, it was being articulated that other navies should go out. Today, it is being articulated that India is a responsible player, and therefore it will play with other navies. So, of course, this Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, where India is sort of it started by India, where India is engaging with the larger Indian Ocean region states. There is always the question of whether India has the capability to sustain the sort of ambitions that Indian Navy perhaps continues to outline, and that remains a problem. The issue of China's rise, much like other states, India also faces some of the same challenges, and how to how to manage its cooperative engagement with China with the conflictual elements that are part and parcel of the dynamic. And one of the aspects where India has tried to deal with this problem is by multilateral engagement. So if you look at the scale and scope of Indian Navy's multilateral engagement today, they are far more significant and they are far more substantive than they have ever been in the past. And what has added a certain sense of salience to this discourse is, of course, this idea of the Indo-Pacific, this idea that India stands at the center of this discourse on the new regional order, and of course China's rise and how America is managing its pivot to the Asia Pacific. Some final thoughts on enduring challenges. Enduring challenges basically remain some of the same ones that were there in the early years of India's independence. The northern frontier still remains a predominant security concern. So every time there is an attack on the border in the north, other services are able to defend their roles, whereas Indian Navy struggles to. And that creates this dissonance in the minds of the Indian public and in the Indian policymakers. So where should the resources go? There's also a problem that India still does not have a national security strategy. So all the Indian maritime strategy that Indian Navy has come up with over the years, they are in a void. They are without any larger political framework. That might be changing, but still India lacks a comprehensive national security strategy. The issue of decision-making processes remains a problem. Either you have a decision-making process that are dominated by the civilians, where the military does not have a role, or you have policy-making processes which are paralyzed almost because of the numerous scandals that have come out in the procurement system. Finally, the issue of indigenization and also close ties with the US. This is Indian Navy today has one of the closest partners in the US Navy. Most recently, the logistical support agreement was also signed with the navies. Now, which is an important benchmark in terms of India's relationship, how India's relationship with the US is progressing. It's not entirely clear how India can manage both its short-term challenge of managing its security challenges around its periphery with help from like-minded countries like the US, and also at the same time forcing self-reliance on the country. Just to conclude, if we are looking at the Indian Ocean as the center of global politics, increasingly as a center of great power politics, then Indian Navy's rise is significant, but Indian Navy's challenges are even more significant. Thank you.
Do we still want to press or break? I know we ran a little bit long. Brett? Anybody?
I think we can have Carl's
Okay.
presentation.
Great. So again, I'll have Dr. Thayer come up. Again, I think you saw earlier today the small southeastern nations, high GDP, high defense growth. There's no nation in Southeast Asia growing faster than Vietnam. So Dr. Thayer, thank you.
Thank you, Randy. I'd like to thank the Royal Canadian Navy and my long-term friend for decades, Jim Thayer, for the invitation to address you. This is my first time at this particular forum. One caveat, I'm at the University of New South Wales at the Australian Defence Force Academy. My views are my personal ones. They don't reflect the department. They don't reflect the Australian Defence Force. Vietnam is difficult because of sources, and I was hoping that the white paper would finally come out to give me better guidance for today, but here we go. So, brief background. It's 61 years old. Yes, last year was the 60th anniversary. It moved from a Seashore Defense Bureau, Riverine Ops, to a Department of the Navy in 1959, logistics infiltration across the South China Sea to South Vietnam, to a Naval Command, but it's in the Vietnam People's Army. You have the Navy and the Air Defense Air Force. I think that's important. Other maritime things are the Vietnam Coast Guard. A sleight of hand there. Its name in Vietnamese has never changed in Vietnamese, but they made it a Coast Guard so they could get Japanese assistance to it as a civil agency, but it's under the Ministry of Defense. Vietnam Fisheries Surveillance Force, newly stood up 2013, Ministry of Agriculture and Development. There's a border guard which has some maritime capabilities, and there's a paramilitary maritime militia, but I won't deal with that in depth. The Vietnam People's Navy is 40,000, and I've read somewhere it's the only navy in the world where the naval infantry is actually larger than the number of seamen that they have in it. Since 2010, it has 5 forces: the surface ships, the submarines that they've just acquired, the artillery and land-based missiles, and that's the extra system from Israel, and the Bastion missiles. The Naval Air Force, which is mainly utility helicopters, transport, some embarked on their frigates as anti-submarine warfare, and thanks to Canada, the Twin Otters for maritime patrol, and one is converted for VIP, moving around the region. The Naval Fleet, its numbers, I have 5 kilo submarines delivered, the Varshavyanka class, enhanced kilos, 1 more to come this year. Gepard frigates, which could increase the number. The original 2 were guided missiles, the latter 2 anti-submarine warfare. The Molina corvettes, guided missiles, probably up to 10. Earlier, Tarrant 1 corvettes. And then we get into, you have to be Cold War era. These are ex-Soviet ships that are a long time, the Pecha corvettes. BPS, only one version of that. They decided to go for higher technology. And then the other, on the right-hand column, the patrol boats, which is important, is the first one is indigenously developed, a 500-ton gunboat that they're producing, and all the rest are legacy items. So, now, having worked my entire adult career in the Australian Defence Force as a civilian, I learned commander's intent. I was given questions, and these are the ones I'm going to answer for my presentation. What are the general challenges facing the maritime agencies? I'll concentrate on the regular Navy. And are they complementary with broader maritime strategies themselves? The first, hello, it's the budget, stupid. That's it. In Vietnam, officially, they released figures in the last white paper, but outside analysts actually think that defense expenditure is a bit higher. Vietnam says 2% of GDP, it's put at 2.3 or higher by other estimates. These figures here are unclassified from the Australian Defence Intelligence Organization, which releases an annual report every year, so I've gone on that. The priority in defense funding is for Navy, Air Defense, Air Force, and the Coast Guard itself. So 2.3% of defense, so 3 metrics. You can take percentage of GDP, 2.3, percentage of government spending, just under 8.5%, and then the third metric, dollar spending, so defense budget of around $5 billion, of which 1.6 to 2 million is used annually for procurement, so it's not an awful lot of money. What are the challenges, other challenges to modernization? Well, the inter-service balance. It's a country that's fought large land wars and has a massive land army, and they don't, as the Vietnamese told me, you give anything to the army, you never get it back. So they're organized into military regions, and they're modernizing armor and artillery at a time when the senior leadership is pushing Navy, air defense force. And the figures for the Vietnamese Navy haven't really changed, and the IISS military balance is sitting at 40,000. So I just flag that the inter-service, the ethos of People's War, how do you create a doctrine and strategy at sea when there's absolutely no experience for it? The next is legacy issues. You get a report, India gave 5,000 spare parts, and what it was, Vietnam requested them, and the Indians had them in a junkyard, so they didn't bother to search for what Vietnam wanted. They gave them the whole kit and caboodle and sent it off to Vietnam. It was cheaper than the Vietnamese sorted out. So you've got, and then you're moving up in high technology, and I just bought my first new car in 8 years, so you can imagine me being a specialist on cars that had keys. I've got a car, you start with just a button, so the technology transfers, the skill sets of all those people working on the old car aren't the same for the new stuff's coming in. And that has made huge demands for logistics support and building and upgrading, and particularly India's helped naval ports to handle the new kinds of ships that they've got. Procurement, heavy reliance on Russia, but they're trying to diversify away in terms of technologies. It still will go back, but the closer Russia and China get, it raises the question of reliability in terms of a conflict. And so the procurement in the past, you went to Finland because they had MiGs and you could cannibalize them. You went to the Ukraine for naval support. That's a bit difficult these days. You go to Serbia and countries that are familiar. Anyway, I've got to stick to schedule here. And then the technology and integration, the revolution of military affairs that our Chinese colleague mentioned, real criticisms in Vietnam that they buy equipment, but they haven't yet put it together. One would be the land attack cruise missiles for their submarines. Leave it to you experts, but at least I think you need satellites to help that. Vietnam's got the missiles, but it hasn't got the ability to do the targeting. And as increasingly as they're moving in Israeli radars and others, how does that fit? And with drones, Sweden, India, etc. So I'll move on. So the challenges of modernization, continuing, building up a national defense industry. Increasingly they want co-production, transfer of technology. That was a major item in the U.S. Joint Vision Statement after Obama just prior to the lifting, that you could have defense trade and move in the future perhaps to production. So Vietnam wants to be able to build up its stockpiles, particularly cruise missiles, which would be expended. Now, developing a maritime strategy, the Defense White Paper in 2009 gave the Army, Navy, to manage and control the waters in islands in the South China Sea, maintain security, counter acts against our sovereignty, sovereign rights and jurisdictions, protect national interests, and be ready for joint and combined operations. That is a huge task for the Navy that I'm particularly talking about. In terms of maritime doctrine, they've gone from a two-dimensional to a three-dimensional naval force and it's under consideration. So when I move to the acquisition of submarines, which over the last several years, only in March of this year did the Scientific Check and Admission Board under the Ministry of National Defense approve a research project on the role of the Kilo submarines, and that fundamental listings of logistics, principles of force employment, operational plans would be drawn up, and on that basis, the commandant of their naval academy was told to change the training routines for that. So we're going to try to move on. Now, this I apologize for. It's an unclassified U.S. Pacific Command document that appeared in defense journals, and so the clarity isn't all that clear. It's listing from maritime security, HADR, peacekeeping operations down the bottom end. You get into education, it's the red areas, and therefore in the future, maritime aviation, and particularly rotary, to have that awareness in the South China Sea, and how to maintain, acquire, and employ unmanned aerial vehicles. Those are the two that will become critical as you move through this period, and other areas are pretty well covered. So I apologize for the lack of clarity on that, but that was an interesting. Now, strategy. 2007, Vietnam drew up its first comprehensive maritime strategy to the year 2020. It was to integrate the economy of Vietnam's coast with the hydrocarbon resources in its continental shelf and its islands, and link it to national defense. So that was the goal. And it was by the end of this period to have about 55% of GDP coming from the maritime zone. It's just around 48% today. 55 to 60% of Vietnam's exports come from the maritime area. So an important requirement. Now Vietnam has a 3,000 kilometer coastline, and here I am in Canada, and I live in Australia, so you're not going to be impressed by that. That's 3 times the land area of Vietnam, to put it in a perspective that they have to do it. And roughly a third of the Vietnamese people live and are dependent upon that coastal economy. And the income from the sea, if we take in 64% is oil and gas, 14% fisheries, and then down we go. Training. Well, they got the kilo submarines, and defense attaché see them patrolling the coast. And one news report in Vietnamese where the Russian advisors were so proud to be on shore with their boys were out sailing. The report revealed that the entire commands are in Russian because it's the technology. Well, they have a group, in my next slide, I'll get on to it, a graduate just finished the basic course in India, and they speak English. So here you're going to have 6 submarines and crews that can take orders in Russian and all the technical stuff, and then one's in English. Priority now on upgrading all the higher education, all the policy, and all the educational and technical schools to meet with that. The training also, U.S. Coast Guard helping the Vietnamese Coast Guard, Japan helping the Vietnamese Coast Guard, India offering all kinds of training across all areas that would affect them. This year, the Defense Ministry announced they were going to be sending a record number of 200 Vietnamese military officers overseas. Now, since 1999, Australia has trained over 2,000 Vietnamese, from senior courses to basic intelligence groups, short courses, logistics and management courses. And at National Day in September this year, the Defense Attaché said there were 300 Vietnamese military personnel at all levels doing bits and pieces and long-term courses. That's quite remarkable. And they're pressing every other country to offer access to that. And once at a conference in St. Petersburg, I went to a military museum to look around, and all these ratings came in for the Vietnamese Army, all rubbed up against the winter, so they're training there as well. But for India, this report came out in the Indian press. They've only, for the submariners and Australians, they've done the basic course. They barely left the classroom, barely get on. It's like making me learn all about the frigate before you take me out on it. So I have some appreciation. So the first class of 16, 20 officers, 40 other ranks at the Indian Naval Station. Most training was in the classroom to understand the structure of the submarine, familiarize navigators, engineers, communicators about the onboard systems, but very little practical experience on the submarine. And this particular journalist was saying they need advanced undersea warfare, complete the course and get the dolphins. That's what we're doing. My next questions were, to what extent does public awareness of maritime issues help or hinder maritime modernization? I'm not going to criticize my host for giving that question. Vietnam is a one-party state which manages public opinion very carefully, and unless the public opinion supports the regime, we tend to get put down. But one thing is certain, they've had anti-China protests, and Vietnam has responded in the sense that any failure of leadership to defend Vietnamese sovereignty is going to run into public opinion. So they're reviving Vietnam's maritime past, and including the former puppets of South Vietnam as martyrs who died for the country, and rewriting and putting that into their accounts. That's the 1974 battle in the Parasols. And extensive historical work that they would not put in the text because it might offend China itself. So you do have that in public, but the point is about public opinion is that the regime has responded through a mobilization campaign of rewriting the history books, praising it. So in the past, if you were there and you saw a poster, you'd see a main force army guy, guerrillas, and a woman. Now you actually have the striped shirt of a Navy guy appearing in all these posters in Vietnam, providing that link. So it's patriotic. That's why they're on those posters. They march in parades, the naval industry. It's the focus on the EC. But against all that is this huge veterans group that fought the land war against the United States that are still land continental bound, to miniaturize it as we go on. Questions on Vietnam. What are the challenges of integrating a total new capability, the Kilo-class submarines, and how effective would it be? Well, I'm trying to stick to my brief. All these all these are submarine capabilities in general, and I would take the sea control in Vietnam as only sea denial. They couldn't move into that. Special Forces is on there, but I was told, got regularly tell me that the last one, you can look at the hatch, all the previous 4 were configured for special warfare, and I can't understand how you can take a roll off and move it across. We haven't had reports yet, so maybe they haven't done that, so they're not configured. But be all these particular capabilities that they would have to do, and as my Bible, I rely on James Goldberg, our former commandant, who we gave an honorary degree to, but he said the Vietnamese are trying to do something very quickly that no Navy has managed successfully on such a scale with such a limited boats, and he reckons they'll have Russians on board for years to come. So the effectiveness and capability of what Vietnam is doing, I rely on Lyle Goldstein and his use of Chinese sources. What better way of evaluating the Vietnamese Navy? That the subs can deliver lethal blows with torpedoes and anti-ship cruise missiles, but the major weaknesses that I've been hinting at, lack of experience in operating complex weapons and surveillance, targeting, and battlefield management. So they haven't moved into that. And the most promising strategy versus China, and I'll move to my last slide, is deterrence. And the Vietnamese, not speaking officially, a civilian, put mutually assured destruction in quotation marks because it was to target Chinese flag vessels. Once relations had developed to armed conflict, it was to target those vessels, to set up insurance rate, threaten world trade, and have the whole world come in. Vietnamese are very good at this, and getting them to do the job of keeping China and the conflict down. So that here is arguing that the strategy was to stay in the game, not to win a conventional war, but to mobilize public opinion, to put pressure on China to stop it, because it would disrupt the importance of the sea lines and communication. Thank you.
All right, so thank you everybody. Thank you for coming back, especially this time of the day. Really, thank you for coming back. So gentlemen, I think we have 2 mics there, so they'll get happy to start talking. I think they'll turn on back there. Again, with questions, please, your name, who you represent, and what we're going to do is rather than necessarily have all 3 comment on a topic that's broad, maybe we'll have 1, 2 at the most, and we'll allow more questions to cycle through, if that's okay. Sir.
Thank you very much. Rob Hubert, University of Calgary. Thank you for 3 excellent presentations. I'd like to ask...
Can we get the volume up a little bit more? I'm not sure we're going to be able to hear you.
Can I ask? Is it up now? Yeah. Okay. I'd like to ask Captain Zhang and Professor Pant one issue that they didn't talk about in terms of the modernization, and that's the nuclear deterrent, particularly in regards to the modernization that both the Indians and the Chinese Navy are going through. I'm thinking, of course, of the Arians for the Indian Navy and the Type 94 and 96 for the Chinese Navy. Where does nuclear deterrence, where does that program fit in within the modernization process? And how significant is it relative to all these other aspects in terms of sea denial, power projection, all the other issues that we've been talking about? But that part of the conversation seems to be very, very clear in its absence. So I'm just wondering if you could elaborate.
Okay. So your captain, deterrence, nuclear deterrence, where does that fit in the overarching strategy? Professor Pant, for the PLA Navy and also for the Indian Navy, if you wish to comment. Go grab a microphone right there in front of you. Yeah, please. Nuclear deterrence is the context of the overall maritime strategy.
China pursues nuclear strategy of no first use of nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons for the Navy is the submarine-based or the sea-based ballistic missiles. Those nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines actually they are the backbone China's national defense. They are the last needs. And although our nuclear-powered submarines, which can fire ballistic missiles, have improved and the number has increased, but still we take the policy of no first use. That means we will only use them for counterattack if China is attacked by nuclear weapons. Otherwise, we will not first use nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Pant, you want to talk a little bit about the Indian Navy?
Yes, I think
Bring it up a little closer.
for Indian Navy, it's very central to the way Indian Navy develops posture as operational lines. For a long time, the argument in India was that India does not really have credibility in its posture because of not having a sea-based reserve. And I think the entry of Raytheon nuclear submarine into the picture, that is resolved. And I think that is largely related to its posture vis-à-vis China, where it wants credibility in its second strike capability, and that's what nuclear submarine gives it. So I think there has been an important milestone that Indian policymakers claim or Indian Navy strategists claim have been crossed with the coming into operation.
Sir.
Hi, Social Media from France. A question to Captain Zhang and a question to Professor Pant. Do you think, Captain Zhang, that China could have more bases than Djibouti in the Indian Ocean, and especially in the context of the Kashgar-Gwadar economic corridor? Do you think that the Chinese Navy could also take advantage of the port of Gwadar? And a question to Professor Pant. Do you think that India could see in the future a stabilizing role of China in its in the Chinese-Pakistani relation because of the instability in this area, and that India could have a different view on a Chinese presence in Pakistan?
So could you just clarify again, more Chinese bases where?
No, there is only one in Djibouti. So my question is, will China consider having more bases than just the one in Djibouti? And I'm thinking of the famous port of Gwadar.
Okay, thank you. I just said in my presentation that ever since 2008, the Chinese Imperial Navy has dispatched 24 flotillas of warships conducting counter-piracy and escort operations in the Gulf of Aden and waters of Somalia. This has become a very big burden on the Chinese Navy because that we have never seen so many warships at one time operating so far from our motherland. The first flotilla, when they were conducting this in early 2009, they didn't dock or stop at any harbor. They just get their replenishment from the replenish ship. But you see vegetables, fruits after 15 or 20 days, fresh vegetables. So that's why now we are considering establishing a logistics support location in Djibouti. I have to say that it is far from a military base in terms of the scale and also the function. It also only provides some logistics support. So this will be more convenient for sailors and to get more fuel, oil, and also food, vegetables. Up to now, as far as I know, we don't have any plan to establish other locations in other countries, not to say military bases. Thank you.
Yeah, this is, I think, the China, Pakistan, and India triangle is a very interesting question because this goes to the heart of Sino-Indian relations in many ways. And there is this debate in India at the moment as to how to approach its China policy in the future. And I think one of the most important determinants of that would be the Sino-Pak relationship. So on the one side, there is an argument that eventually China has converging interests with India, whether we are looking at terrorism, whether we are looking at the rise of Islamist extremism. China and Indian interests converge significantly, and therefore, eventually the two sides should be able to work with each other. There is another argument, competing argument on the other side, where the argument is that for China, Pakistan is an important proxy in its dealing with India, and therefore, if China wants to see, if China does not want to see India as a regional player, then it helps China to have Pakistan there to scuttle India's rights. So I think there are these two competing arguments, and which argument would win would depend primarily on, in my opinion, what happens in the short to medium term insofar as China's approach to regional terrorism is concerned, because that's where Indian government, at least the present Indian government, has taken a very strong stand that Pakistan's approach towards terrorism harms not only India but also harms the region. And in fact, the present Prime Minister has made it an argument that the entire Asian prosperity depends on what happens to Pakistan in terms of its relationship to terrorism. So I think there is a larger issue here about India's future trajectory and the future trajectory of India's Pakistan relations, and how China would relate to that in the near future, and how that argument between the two competing schools of thought gets resolved.
Thank you. Jim, please.
Jim Boutillier, MSC16. Two questions. One to Senior Captain Zhang. You stressed the enormous burden that the deployments to the Northwest Indian Ocean brought on the PLAN. That surprises me somewhat. Admittedly, these deployments began 8 years ago, but the PLAN is a very, very large Navy and sophisticated. I'd be interested in what burden that really constituted for your Navy. If you could tell us more, and also tell us more about what other lessons you got moving into long-range blue water operations. And a question to Dr. Pant, and that's New Delhi's assessment of the likely Gwadar-Kashgar axis in terms of road, rail, and pipeline. It strikes me that that facility transits a highly volatile area in Balochistan, and I know that the Pakistanis have allocated border defense to provide some protection for Chinese workers and so on, but I'm wondering whether in fact it will ever be realized or if it will be held to ransom, and what the New Delhi assessment might be of that initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Pant, go ahead, you go first.
The issue of, I think, CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, I think that's a very interesting topic because, as we pointed out, there are a number of challenges that it faces and a number of opportunities that it presents. And I think that is what seems to be the heart of the debate in India at the moment, whether India can partake some of the opportunities that the present project presents itself. However, India's objections center primarily on the issue of where the corridor traverses from. So this idea that it goes through the disputed territory which India claims as its own, that is problematic because that basically means that China is ratifying the present status quo in favor of Pakistan. And that is unacceptable to India for obvious reasons. So I think that is the bone of contention, not the fact that it presents an enormous opportunity to transform the region, primarily because it would impose certain obligations on Pakistan to manage its internal security in a manner that is conducive to regional economic development. And that is always good. That India will benefit from and that the region will benefit from. So I think the objections largely stem from the location of the project rather than for the fundamental underpinnings of the project.
Senior Captain.
I want to ask some comments to the relationship between China and Pakistan. In March, and especially in May this year, we went to India and had some discussions with our Indian counterparts in some think tanks. So we should say that China-Pakistan relationship is a normal country-to-country relationship. China will never support any forms of terrorist acts. The dispute between Pakistan and India should be settled between these two countries. China will not interfere in this issue. And I think the China-Pakistan relationship is normal country-to-country relationship. And I told my Indian friends that India has good relationship with Japan. We know we have some disputes with Japan, but we take the relationship between India and Japan as a normal country-to-country relationship, so long as it is not aimed against China. And they have said publicly their relations, their joint military exercises are not aimed at China. So we think it's okay. So we hope our Indian friends also take such a normal attitude toward the normal country-to-country relationship between China and Pakistan. We didn't demand that India stop their relationship with Japan or other countries. So it is a normal way for sovereign countries to hold or to have normal relationship with other countries. So that's the point I want to add. Concerning James' question, really it is a great burden for China. 80 years ago, the Thayer Navy didn't have the experience of operating so many warships in distance so far from China. Only maybe we send our warships one or two to visit European countries and the United States to cross the Pacific Ocean or some ocean. That's the maybe the farthest location we have ever traveled. I remember in 2002 when I was working in the United States, our warships visited Hawaii and then Everett Station, Vancouver. We had to prepare this visit for a long time. So in 2008, when we dispatched, it was really a burden. But we acted under the resolution of the UN because previously China was often accused or charged that we are a easy rider. So now we are trying to provide some public security tools to the international community. I said that we have escorted more than 6,000 vessels. Half of these vessels were foreign vessels. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Yes, Commander Odom, Asia Pacific Center. My question is for Senior Captain Zhang. During the luncheon speech, our speaker was asked a question about the development of the Japanese Navy and One Belt, One Road. My question for you is, what are your personal views on the relationship between PLA modernization and the One Belt, One Road concept?
Yes, yeah.
One Belt, One Road initiative.
Relationship with PLA and Navy modernization.
Okay. I think the One Belt, One Road initiative is mainly an economic initiative. It wants to strengthen the connectivity with countries along the belt and the road, and especially on the southern part is the 21st century maritime Silk Road. China wants to strengthen the cooperation with the countries along this road in terms of connectivity, transport, and also in aspects such as maritime cooperation. These areas include anti-piracy and maritime navigation safety and marine scientific research and also combating transnational crimes, including human trafficking or weapons trafficking. So I think the pure Navy in future can take part in the 21st century in other countries. Especially now we have put forward our initiative to conduct joint patrols with ASEAN countries in the South China Sea. Also it can include other countries to maintain peace and stability in the region. And also we will hold joint exercises under the framework of 10+1 and also maybe bilateral or multilateral framework. So I think the PLA Navy can play a role in the especially the 21st Maritime Strategy initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Hi, Stan Weeks. I'd like to ask each of our panelists, you've given us a very good and comprehensive list of the challenges your respective Navy faces. For each of you, what is your top number one challenge? What worries you most? What keeps you awake at night?
Dr. Thayer, when we start with you, you've been so patient sitting down there. But
It's the way it's that Vietnam occupies 21 features, and it's the worst nightmare would be to have one of those taken from them. It would undermine the legitimacy of the government because it would be very difficult to respond to, even though they run an island taking exercise just after the arbitral tribunal would take its account. But I think it's that's just it. Just losing one of these islands to China as a result of political push, and then not being able to do anything about it and given a harsh public reaction.
Dr. Pant?
Well, I think for the Indian Navy, it's largely internal, and the challenge is to continue to make an argument about its own relevance, despite the fact that the main or the immediate challenge to India's national interests or national security comes from the northern frontier. So I think that the challenge to continuously remind the policymakers and the public at large that Indian Navy has a big role to play in the way India envisages to support the larger global polity and economy. Something that they will have to continuously, they cannot stop and think that their job is done. And unless that continuous momentum is maintained, I'm afraid there is a danger that India might backslide to a situation where Navy again becomes a Cinderella service.
Senior Captain, what's the one thing that keeps you up at night? Go ahead and answer.
The challenge for modernization of the PLA Navy, I think first is money, and second equipment, and third is personnel. Although we have a 1.3 billion population, just as I said, now young men with high ambition have received high education are reluctant to join the Navy. And also the personnel, we are short of the qualified officers and sailors. Considering the professor's remarks on the South China Sea, China, I don't think China is targeting its modernization against any country in this area. I just said maybe we can strengthen our cooperation within the framework 10+8 that the 10 ASEAN countries and China, Japan, the United States, Australia, Korea, South Korea, New Zealand, and India. So in this area, I think China has put forward the initiative to conduct joint patrols in South China Sea with ASEAN countries. And also, this is inclusive, it's open to other countries, so long as our purpose is to maintain peace and stability in this area. So we can conduct cooperation on fighting piracy or something like that. We can provide technical or some other assistance to other countries, just as we have done to protect the safety of the Malacca Straits. We have provided some assistance to some countries. And in the future, also we can deploy joint patrols in South China Sea, because now with the almost 30 countries warships patrolling the Gulf of Aden, the pirates are now acting very actively in South China Sea. So this is a common concern, and we can conduct joint cooperation with these countries. Thank you.
Any other questions? Final comments from anybody on the panel? Doctor? Just talking, I think. Yeah.
Is it, you can hear. Well, I just said island taking, I think the larger context would be what keeps Vietnam up at night would be the lack of a naval balance of power in the region. Not that they're going to ally with the United States for it, but would be the two conditions. The U.S. is going to concede China's dominance for some reason because of the larger cooperation, or that Russia and China get together and it finds itself isolated, that no one's going to fight the last island for Vietnam. So that's why that would be the context in which the regime would face the loss of the island. But Vietnamese didn't do anything about it. No one else is doing anything about it.
Please.
Okay. China has publicly said many times that we have the power, the capability to take back the islands illegally occupied by other countries, but we didn't do so. We just want to maintain peace and stability. Our late leader, Deng Xiaoping, has said that we can set aside disputes and seek joint development. Up to now, actually, the joint development is difficult, but some countries have conducted their own development exploitation. I should say that China has exercised great restraint in this area. Up to now, we haven't set up an oil rig in waters near the Nansha Island, also known as Spratly Islands. So, but many countries have got much oil, gas from these areas. So I think this is one example. The other example that China has never used its navy to deal with the fishery issues, but other countries have used their navy to seize the Chinese fishermen and sometimes to torture Chinese fishermen. They were stopped by the Chinese Coast Guard. So I don't want such kind of tragedies to happen. And China will still refrain from using force. We will never use force for the first time, unless we are attacked by other countries. So many friends ask whether China will use force in dealing with the matters in the surrounding countries. We say absolutely no. We hope to expand our cooperation with these countries and also countries outside this region. We want to maintain peace and stability in this region. This is our ultimate aim. Thank you.
Big round of applause.